This will be another quite long video. We're gonna bring the old truck for the yearly inspection. It's been out of traffic for some years now, but it's closing up on becoming 50 years old and not requiring the inspections anymore. So, and we had issues. We had used it some this winter, but that was not on any public roads, only on private land. So but it's stuck on full heat in the cab. That can be a bit of a problem in the summer. I have tried using it in the summer a little and it's no fun. So in this video we will look at trying to sort out the cabin heat, check the fluids, grease over the truck, simply looking over it a little before inspection time. Try to figure out where all the different cables, because it's a bunch of cables feeding different flaps, opening where the airflow should be, and a hatch in the front if it takes in air from the outside or from the cab itself. Did look around the machine a little and trying to figure things out. I haven't really worked with this a whole lot. It's been working. I do have an air leak back here. I'm not sure if it should have some kind of like release valve or something in between the rear brakes, but it's been working, so it's not a major issue for now. It's not very good access under the dash, and the question is the valve stuck that it operates, or is it the cable itself? So we tried getting some access, but turned out that the throttle cable, because you have like a hand throttle where you can pull up the idle a little if you want to, that one kind of holds things in place. To get access to that, the grill was removed. There is just a couple of bolts on each side, and it's held in place with like springs at the top, so it's quite simple. Took some measurements for the throttle cable to be able to reinstall it roughly as it is. Turns out it's the sheet, the outer part of the cable going down there. It's held in place with a clamp far up there, not easy to either access or record anything usable with. I had to resort to the camera to take pictures and see what was happening up there, and I'm not sure, maybe you could barely catch it, but I was able to get up there and undo that clamp, and that allowed me to start pulling this section of the dash out for some access to the temperature controls. I was able to unhook the one that goes to the heating valve. Also opened up the end of the dash on the other side. It's just a couple of bolts. Old machines like this are quite simple to work with. Not a whole lot of electronics in here, I can tell you. And the valve is at the top of the heating element up there. And it will be better video of it a little later on, but getting my hands up there, I could start working it back and forth, and I had unhooked the cable at the other end and put on a hose and could start spraying some lubricant in there. Also try to lubricate the pivot point for the valve itself, and things started moving quite freely. That will cause issues later on. There is also a cable down to this flap in the front that you can open to access or take in air from the outside. There is also a little lever here that we figured out that we didn't really knew about, but you can open that to give the feet of the passengers some hot air if you want to. Here double checking that we get lubricant all the way out, and then hooking them back onto to where the lever itself is not easy. It wasn't easy to get it off even, but getting it back on there was more of a struggle, but kind of got the hang of it. I tried lubing the next one with one of those things you place on there, and it's supposed to kind of spray lubrication in there. Turned out didn't work very well. And maybe you can see there is a spring clamp on top of the dash. That one is kind of holds the outer part of the cable in place, so that it operates. I gave up on lubing things with that clamp on thing. It was just not access for it, so I took each of them off. There are 4 of them. 2 operate internal flaps if it goes up towards the windshield or to the cabin itself, and then you have one for that external intake, and the last one is for the heating valve itself. I placed lube in there and then blew in it, but I got fed up with getting lubricant in my mouth, so ended up fetching a syringe to help blow the lubricant through and make sure the cables are well lubed. Once I was happy with the lubrication to all of the climate control cables, it was time to tackle the idle adjustment hand throttle, and that one has kind of ridges, so it can get stuck in different steps, and that spring clip I removed. I'm not sure if you could have pulled it all the way out with that in place, but I removed it to be certain I could get it all the way out. I think it was some kind of stop pair, so it's not possible to pull it too far out. It's kind of damaged a little at the end, so it was hard pulling it all the way out. Here you can see the heating valve properly. I added a string to it to be help if it got stuck again, so you could pull the string and help or free it up. Yeah, it's gonna cause issues more on that later, but started bolting things back together. Now trying to get the idle cable back out. I couldn't push it, it was just too stuck because it's been a little bit damaged where it's been pinched in place at the bottom, so I was outside with pliers and started pulling on it a little, and it needs to go in a certain orientation for that spring clip to have the indentations in the correct way. So I had my dad kind of rotate it to make sure everything got to where it was supposed to. There is a nut on the inside holding it. It's also a little like metal spacer there that helps hold it in the dash. And here we have the needing to do some adjustments, making sure I get everything lined up and in place, start bolting things up. Just 4 bolts, 1 on each corner. And then I had forgotten about the clamp, so tightened it up in the correct position, but then I had to undo this to be able to kind of get enough movement to get the clamp into place. Here you can see it at the very top. Here it's angled down, it needs to be rotated 90 degrees and then clamp the cable sheeting in place. And where it had been parked, it had started leaking coolant where it was sitting. And here I've confirmed that it's the axle on the water pump that tends to leak, because earlier this winter before it was started it was low on coolant, and seems to be able to lose like 6 or 7 liters through the pump axle. The plugs on the gearbox and the rear axle are square and like 11 millimeters. We ground down some half-inch adapter thing to be able to fit there, so the plugs could be removed. Just to check the oil level for now. Probably I hope to change some of the fluids later this summer, but I wanted to check that the fluid levels are good now that we're going on a little bit of a longer journey and bringing it for its inspection. but they're good. Tiny bit low, but I could feel level with my finger stuck in there. I removed some heat shield up here because it's been some little leak here. I think the air system gets some oil in it. I think the compressor has some kind of little leak, so some of the engine oil makes it into the compressor and the compressed air system. I don't think it's an emergency in any way, but here over time it had built up quite a bit of crud. If I'm gonna do more wrenching on it with water pump and so on, I will need to clean it up better. We just added water for now. We'll need to look over the coolant system before the winter comes. Was a little bit low on the oil also, so a couple of liters were added. It was started up to double check on the coolant leak, but does not seem to leak while running. Something that did leak was the heating element in the cab. Now when we had operated that valve back and forth, it started leaking, and if you had it in the closed position, it was leaking badly. If you had it in the open position, it wasn't that bad, but that defeated the purpose of freeing it up. So we will solve that in a little bit, but went over the machine, tried greasing all the fittings. We missed a couple, but more of that after the inspections. There are quite a few of them, especially with the dump bed that's on it, and it has side dump option also, so there are quite a few. Tried going over all of them this time. Most of the times we don't grease all of them, and some of them I'm not sure we have ever greased, but this time around I'm doing it properly. Some of them are quite easy or quite hard to access up near the cylinder for the dump bed, and the ones here in the joints on the drive shaft, they turned out to be impossible, at least with the grease nozzle that we have on this electric grease gun. The power shaft for the hydraulic pump, that one had better fittings, could be accessed. So I'm skipping a whole lot of them, as you understand. There are plenty more on here. And as I go, I replace a couple of bad ones where the grease escapes backwards. So it's better to do it right away. Even if you get grease in there, you're more likely to get some gunk in there if it's not closing up properly. So, and grease zerks are not very expensive. The heat shield on their cab was put back into place. It's just 3 bolts holding it in place. Here I think they have used not the proper mounts. They have added some self-tapping screws to some of the points. So the solution for the cabin heater was to simply unbolt the hoses and plug them for now. We don't need any heat in the cab in the near future, so but that will need to be looked over before we go into winter. I'm not sure if you can get a new valve for it, or I've found something that might be a repair kit with a new seal for the valve, but I will need to get that out before knowing for sure. Emptied the air tanks. They do get a little bit of oil in them, so this supports the theory that the compressor uses a little oil. Cab was lowered back down, grill was added back on, and some cleanup was done in the cab from the coolant that had leaked out. Tried getting the grease fittings for the drive shaft in a better position and see if it would be possible to access them. Turned it out it was not possible with the grease nozzle we had on there, so I decided to unbolt them and try to fit the 45-degree angle grease zerks there, and it was possible, but it was so tight that the tiny nipple that is screwed in at the 45-degree angle had to be removed on some of them and then bolted back in place once the first part of the grease zerk was in place. So very fiddly work, but was able. This one it was a bit more room, so I didn't have to remove the end piece of it, and I think the third joint was missed. Then we got a little bit of a scare because when we started driving towards the inspection, the brakes kind of wanna be tiny bit stuck, but that kind of let go. So at inspection, and it passed with flying colors. A little bit uneven brakes in the front, and turns out we will never have to visit them again. It's enough that it's passed inspection when it turns 50 years old. So we celebrated with ice cream and found a suitable load to bring back home. So there it goes, fully road legal. Before we did anything else, we took it and brought home a load of gravel, more on what we used that for in the future video. We were gonna tackle, because they ended up having the front brakes be a little bit stuck after doing the brake testing on the front, but they do torture the brakes quite hard to ensure they are good. We decided to push up the front end, and we realized we had missed a couple of grease points that are involved with the brakes, both front and rear. So ended up having the side we pushed up first a little too low. It started hitting the ground when we pushed up the other side, but that's the good part about being in a dirt field ranching. You can remove a little if you need to. Had it started while we greased there are 2 grease points on each wheel, front and rear. That has to do with the brakes, and we had missed all 8 of them. Should probably have found it had I looked in the manual, because most of the grease points that are not involving the dump bed are covered in some manual we have for it. Here we had issue with one of them because it was not possible to get in with a good angle on it, so we replaced it with a 45-degree one. So then it was easy access. This linkage at the top of the brake here might be causing a little bit of jamming, or because it was a little bit corroded and could have helped have things seize up or lock up. But it's road legal, hopefully forever now, if we can fix the water pump and the heating element in the cab, and probably a few other things in the near future. But that's it for now regarding the truck. I had plenty to do with planting more trees, other stuff, firewood. We're renovating the house a little more, but I'm not covering that at all in video this year. Might show a few pictures in the future, but stay safe, have a great summer.